Thanks a lot. Get started here. So welcome everybody to my session about Power Automate Desktop. It's going to be a getting started session. So I'll give you everything you need to know before you can get started. And of course, this will also be a session with a lot of demos. So I'll try to move as fast as possible through the slides so that we can move to the good stuff. So bear with me. First, a thank you to our sponsors, of course, because without them, this wouldn't be possible. So make sure to visit their websites and check what they are all about. So make sure to do that as well. My name is Daniel Laskewitz. I am a business productivity consultant at Softomotive in the Netherlands, and I work a lot with the Power Platform. That's also why I started the Dutch Power Apps and Flow user group. And we do a lot of great sessions about Power Platform. Yeah, if you want, you can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @Laskewitz. It's a really difficult name, Trisha. You're not the only one that has trouble with it, so that's something that I have to explain every year. So for the agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about Power Platform. I'm going to skip through that really fast. After that, I'm going to talk about the Power Automate, what it's all about, and what parts we all have in there. And then I'm going to zoom into Power Automate Desktop. I'm going to talk about how you can do desktop automation, and desktop automation is the type of automation where you can automate the applications on your machine. And web automation is the next part, and then we're going to talk about how you can automate a website, for instance. Then we'll talk about how you can reach UI flows, which is actually the type of flows that you are creating when you use Power Automate Desktop, how you can use those in the Power Automate website, and how you can leverage some features in there. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about licensing, and I'm going to do a wrap up. And yeah, the Q&A, it can be all through the whole session, so make sure to ask some questions when you want to. But with that, let's talk a little bit about the Power Platform. Yeah, currently it consists of 4 different services: Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. Of course, we have the common data service behind there. We have lots of connectors available. There's more than 400 now. And we also have AI Builder for artificial intelligence in the Power Platform. Why I wanted to show this picture is because Power Automate, of course, gained RPA functionality. And there is still a lot of connectors that you can use in Power Automate without using RPA. And I think that a lot of people should know that the old functionality, or the older functionality, is not going away. It's actually still great functionality. So whenever you have a connector to a certain application, web application, where you can use APIs, make sure to use the Power Automate service to connect to those websites, for instance, or those applications, because RPA is not the solution for everything. RPA is really nice for legacy applications and those kinds of things. But there is still a lot of space also for the connector-based Power Automate workflows. So we're going to zoom into Power Automate now. And we have a lot of types of Power Automate workflows nowadays. We can automate cloud or on-prem services through automated instant or scheduled flows. Those are the flows that you can also see whenever you are on the Power Automate website and you're logged in and you want to create a new flow. When you click new, you get a lot of features available there. There's automated, instant, and scheduled flows. There's also business process flows, which you can create as well. Next to that, there's also AI Builder, which you can use inside your flows. And then we have also the UI flows, which I'm going to talk about today. And that's to automate legacy applications or web applications. And yeah, UI flows is actually Microsoft name for RPA. So that's why I said is RPA behind there. A couple months ago, it's already pretty long ago actually, Microsoft acquired Softomotive. And Softomotive is the company that created Win Automation. And Win Automation is an RPA tool that has been around for a long time already, for 10 years, I believe, or even more. And Win Automation is an application that has been used by a lot of companies already. For instance, yesterday I was talking to a client, and they already had Win Automation, and they're thinking about how to change all the processes to Power Automate Desktop, because Power Automate Desktop is actually a new version of Win Automation. That's how you can see it, because Win Automation is still there. It's also still there for current customers. So when you have started building Win Automation processes, you don't have to worry that it will disappear really soon. There's still the normal contracts that you have with Softomotive. Microsoft still has those, so it's not that they are going to move away from Win Automation really soon, but they are not going to create new features for Win Automation anymore. So that's why Power Automate Desktop came into play, and Power Automate Desktop is actually, you can look at it like it's a new version of Win Automation. So they completely changed the tool around. And let me go to that screenshot. They created an application where you can design your RPA processes. And if you look at the left side of the screen, you can see actions. And all those actions were actually also the same actions in Win Automation. So it's just a new version of Win Automation. It's more integrated into the Power Automate product. So for instance, input and output variables are something that's really new to Power Automate Desktop, and that hasn't been in Win Automation for Power Automate at least. And that's something that that is a new feature in Power Automate Desktop. And there's also other features that are available, but I'm going to talk about those later. Power Automate Desktop is a tool where you can use desktop automation. So if you look at UI flows, they had the possibility to create processes around Win32 applications. But now they are adding a lot more resources as well into Power Automate Desktop. So you can, for instance, automate your Java applications, your Citrix applications, SAP, AS400, and there's also other legacy systems that you can automate with Power Automate Desktop. There's also the way where you can automate web applications, and they used to have only Microsoft Edge and Google Chrome. But now they also added Firefox and Internet Explorer with Power Automate Desktop. And that's all because Win Automation already supported that. And that's something that Power Automate Desktop, of course, also has right now. And what's really cool is that you have recorders available in Power Automate Desktop, where you can easily record certain steps in the process, and then you can automate that, of course. And that's what we're going to show in a little bit. When you download Power Automate Desktop, you can install the applications. There's multiple applications that you can install. So the older UI flow packages that were available since April, I believe, or last year, April, they still exist, but you can also install the Power Automate Desktop preview right now. And you can just select those and click next, and then you will install those on your machine. It will also install some applications or extensions inside your browser. So, for instance, if you have Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, they will install those extensions as well, and that's part of the web automation, of course. You can also opt out to that if you want. So if you don't want to use the web automation, you can still opt out from that as well. And then whenever you're done with installing, you can already get started with a few easy steps in Power Automate. So you can create a new flow in there and click UI flow. When you do that, you will create a UI flow on your machine, and it will get synced to the cloud. So whenever you save your UI flow, it will automatically get saved to Power Automate as well. So you don't have to worry about exporting your files and making sure that it's backed up. It will automatically do that. So that's also a really good thing. You need to have a paid or trial license for Power Automate Attended RPA. So that's something that you need to use Power Automate Desktop. What you also need is a work or school account to sign into Power Automate, of course. And you need to have a Windows device with administrator privileges. So that's something that I've ran into a couple of times already with some people that tried to install it and didn't have administrator privileges. Or what I've also seen is that people used Windows 10 Home Edition, for instance, and that's something that's also not supported. So you need to have at least a device that runs Windows 10 Pro, Windows 10 Enterprise, or Windows Server 2016 or 2019. So that's also something that you need to look at. If you want to run Power Automate Desktop processes in an automated flow, for instance, you also need to have the on-prem data gateway installed, because otherwise you won't have the secure connection between Power Automate, the service, and your local machine, of course. So that's also something that you need to have installed on your machine. And of course, you need to configure that as well. So whenever you download the on-prem data gateway, you can install it, and then you have to sign in with your work or school account to make sure that you have the gateway installed also on your machine. So if you look at the application here, you can see on the left side that you have all the actions available. And you can look at that like a normal Power Automate automated flow, which you used. You have all kinds of connectors available. You can see that on the left side as well, those actions. You have a lot of like folders in there. For instance, Excel is in there, and we're going to use that in a little while in the demo as well. And that contains all the actions that you can do with Excel. And there's also tons of other things available. There's OCR in there. You can do file and folder actions as well. If you want to have a message box in between your process where you would prompt the user to fill something in, for instance, you can do that. There's all kinds of stuff available in there. So after this session, make sure to install this and take a look at all the different actions, because it's really, really interesting to see. Then almost at the top of the screen, you can see subflows. And subflows are like functions. So sometimes when you are creating your RPA process, you don't want to have hundreds of actions inside your process, and you want to make subflows to make sure that you can trigger those subflows from a certain moment inside your process. And that will take away lots of actions from the main process, for instance. So you can have multiple subflows in there to get it a little bit more organized. Next, you have the recorders at the top side. You have the web recorder and the desktop recorder. So if you want to start recording some steps, you can easily select one of those recorders to select all the items you want to use in your process. So for instance, if you use the desktop recorder, you can start an application and start all the different actions that you want to do. And then after that, it will register all those actions, and you can change little parts in there to make sure that it will automate correctly. And the same goes, of course, for the web recorder in there. The next one is, of course, the script. So in the middle of your screen, you will see the whole script. You can see at the left side a little bit that you have like a count of all the actions that you have available here. And those are all the different steps that you have in your script. Next, there's also on the right side the variables part, where you can see input and output variables, but also the variables that come out of the different steps that you have inside your process. So to talk about desktop automation, I thought it was fun to start immediately with a demo. So in this demo, I'm gonna show the Contoso invoicing app, which is a legacy app. And in this scenario, an Excel file gets updated during the day on the desktop of the machine that we're using. Based on a schedule, the process starts, and that's something that you can use, for instance, with an automated flow, of course. So you can start an automated flow where you would schedule, where you would have the scheduled trigger, and you can say, well, I want to schedule this flow every night at 12 at night, and then after that, I want to trigger this process. And then it will trigger the UI flow, which we're going to create in a little bit. And that process will get all input from the Excel file on the desktop. It will open the Contoso invoicing app, and it will enter all the data in there. And at the end, it will, of course, close down both the applications to make sure that we are back at the start of the state we had at the beginning of the process. So let's move to the Power Automate desktop. So when you actually log into the Power Automate desktop application, you can start creating a new flow. You can switch environments, just like when you are on Power Automate, the website. So you can see I have certain different environments here, and I can switch between those. I can, of course, search and go to help and those kinds of things. But for now, we are going to use the invoicing app, and I already created a process for that. So we're not going to create a new one here. We're going to edit this, and now it opens up the process. And in this process, I already did some work because that saves some time. I added an action called Get Special Folder, and this is really an interesting step, because this can get your folder path for certain directories that you use a lot. So if I open this up, you have all kinds of folders here, for instance, desktop, but also program files, pictures, those kinds of things are already available here. And that makes it easier to automate these things. And what it does is actually it gets this special folder path, and it produces a variable in here. And this variable is called desktop path. You can rename it if you want by changing desktop path to something else. But for this, I created a desktop path. And then the next step is going to be launch Excel. So I already told you that at the left side of the screen, you have tons of actions available. And when you open up the Excel folder here, you can see tons of actions available. There's even another folder in there called Advanced. And you can see that there's a lot of actions available here for me to use. And in this case, I use the Launch Excel action. And when I open this one up, you can see that there's some parameters in here. And in this case, I use the FX part here to select the desktop path, because that was, of course, the output from my earlier action. And I selected that one, and I added /invoices.xlsx in there, because that's the name of my file that I have on my desktop. And I'm going to show you that in a little bit. And after that, we have the Launch Excel part. You can change this to with a blank document if you don't want to open a document immediately. So you can also start automating by creating an Excel file, for instance. In this case, I'm going to leave it be. And you can see at the end that the variables produced are Excel instance. And that's really important because later in this process, I'm going to use that, of course. The next step is the get first free column or row from an Excel worksheet. When I open this up, you can see that I only have to enter the Excel instance, and that's the one that we got from the launch Excel, of course. And it will produce first free column and first free row. And then the next step will be reading something from the Excel instance. You can select something else at retrieve. I chose the values from a range of cells, but you can also do single cells values or values from selection. But for now, we are going to use the values from a range of cells. And the start column and start row, I set that to 1, 1, so that it starts at the top left corner. And then the end column will be the first free column. That was one of the outputs from an earlier action. And with the end row, I used the first free row. That was also an output from the earlier action. And what I did in here was I added -1. And that was because if I wouldn't do that, I would also get the first free row or column that I had. It would put that in the data as well. And I don't want that. I only want filled in data, of course. So that's how I did that. And there's also a really important one here, and that's the first line of range contains column names. And that's something I have in this Excel file, so you really need to make sure that you check that, because otherwise it will also see the column names as one of my rows in here. It produced also the variable called Excel data. So from there I can move on with all the Excel data I got. And what happens next is I'm going to run an application in here. And that application, let me see if I already have it opened up. No, I don't. I can see my screen here, so I have to close down my presentation. Yeah, here we go. So I have an application here called Contoso Invoicing, and that's the one I'm going to start up here. And this is the path to that application that you can see here. When I open this one up, you can see that there are some possibilities here. You can select this. It looks like a paper. When you do that, you can just go to C, Program Files, and then Contoso Inc., Contoso Invoicing, and Legacy Invoicing App. And that's how I got to this application path. But you can also use a variable, for instance, in here. To make sure that you get the right application path here. You can also add some command line arguments, for instance, but in this case, we're just going to just launch it, and that's it. Another thing that's really interesting is the window style. So you can open up the application, for instance, like this, or you can open it up maximized or something like that. And in this case, I chose maximized. After that, you can also set the after application launch property, continue immediately or wait for the application to load. Sometimes you want to make sure that you want to load the application first, or wait for the application to complete, for instance. Those kinds of steps are also interesting. The variables produced, that's app process ID, and I'm going to use that a little bit later as well. But that's something that you can use, for instance, if you want to close down the application later. The next step in here, and let me show the application again. The next step that we're going to do here is I'm going to click a UI element in window. And I already did this step, but here you can see a UI element that I already got from this application, and I did a click type left click. So what this one is doing, it's actually selecting invoices, and that's what the whole step is about. Then we're doing a for each, and it shows here that there's a for each, and it's going to iterate over the value Excel data, and that was the output of the read from Excel worksheet step here, and it produces the current item variable. And then we're gonna run a subflow. And this is what I already told you. This is really handy to make sure that your process isn't getting too big. And when we go to the create invoice subflow, you can see that there are no actions yet. So that's something that I want to do with you to make sure that we are going to enter all the steps from an invoice. So we already selected the invoices here. Now we want to add a new record. We want to enter some data in here. And then we want to save this. And we want to do that for each invoice that I have available in my file. So let's just go to my desktop and show you the invoices.xlsx. It's already filled with one invoice here. And that's one from Microsoft. I thought it was fun to send an invoice, of course, to Satya Nadella for $50,000. I think that I deserve that money, so that's a good thing. But I can also add another one here, for instance, to make it a little bit more interesting. So let's add it to myself in this case. And I don't have that much money here. So here we go and set the status to invoiced here. So that looks a little bit more different, because if I have an invoice, it's kind of dull here. And there was a drop down in here that you just saw. And it would be interesting to see how the Power Automate desktop, of course, works with that. So let's just close this one down. And when we go back to the process, we can actually check if this works. We have also breakpoints. So for now, I want to check if all the first steps work. And then from there, we're going to automate the rest. So let's just hit and run this process. So here we go. It's going to start. It's going to open up Excel. It actually opened Excel in the background. So you can see here that my Excel file is already opened up. And it already selected the invoices part in here. So when we open up this one, we can see that we are at the create invoice part. For now, I'm going to stop this play, and I'm going to select the desktop recorder. And this desktop recorder is really handy. And you can start recording here, but you can also comment. So if you want to select some comments in here and make it a little bit more easy for everybody to see this, yeah, you can do that as well. So for now, let's just start recording and go to the left side of the screen to the button New Record and select that. You can immediately see that there was an action selected, click element in window, left click on UI element, image, on screen window, console invoicing. In this case, I always want to change the image because it doesn't say anything. So I want to change this to button a new record in this case, so that it makes a little bit more sense. Because if we want to reuse this, we can do this as well. So that's the first step. Then you can see here that we have the date. So if I'll change this to 10/20/2020, oh, you can see that it actually registered a drag and drop element in window. That's something I don't want. I only want to populate text in window. So I'm gonna remove this step from the part here. Populate edit text box. It's again something that isn't really interesting. So I'm gonna change this to imp, and that stands for input, date in this case. And that's the next step. I'm going to select account, and I'm going to add society. So now you can see another edit text box. I want to have imp account. And then I want to go to the contact, of course, and I want to enter email at company.com. And I want to change the edit text box again because it doesn't say anything. So input contact and the amount, let's do 5,000 in this case. And also change this to imp amount. And the last part is uninvoiced. I'm going to use the uninvoiced. And you can see that it already registered the set drop-down list value in window. So it's a different one than the text fields that you saw in your before that. And it selected the option by name invoiced of UI element. And I'm going to change this one to DRP for drop-down status. And that makes it also a little bit more recognizable. And when we're done with this, with all this, we want to save this as well. So in this case, I'm gonna click the save button here, and that's the last part here. So let's change this to btn save. And for now, I think we're done. So let's select finish. Now you can see that we already changed a lot of stuff here. It added all the different auto-generated actions, so it's really easy to do that as well. But what we didn't do is we didn't make it dynamically, because this is just static text that you want to input, and we want to use, of course, the stuff that we got from the Excel worksheet. So that's something that we have to change. So when I would open the populate text field in window, I can change this to something else. I'm going to select the FX. I'm going to use the current item. And there is a way in the current item to actually select a certain a certain part, a certain column, and that's called date in here. So I'm going to enter date in here. So this is how you can select a certain value from the current item. In this case, we're going to do the same. So I'm going to change this to the current item as well. And I believe it was account in here. Let's check to be sure. Account, contact, amount, and status. OK. So I'm going to copy this to make it a little bit more faster. So let's just copy and paste this and change this around to contact. Let's change this one around to amount. And let's change the last one here. And it's a little bit of a different step here. So in here, we want to change this to status in here. So that's it. So if you looked at the input, it just had text box and text to fill in. And with the drop down, it showed drop down list, operation, and option names. So this is a little bit more different than the input field. But when we are done with this and we save this, we want to close down the app, of course, and we want to close the Excel. So that's the process until now. So let's close this down and start the process from the beginning. So here we go. It's gonna get the special folder. It's gonna open the Excel, and you will see that in the bottom of the screen, the Excel is blinking, so it's still opening. And now it's adding all the different stuff inside the legacy application, and it's closing it down. So everything is closed down now. And to prove that it did work, oh, I had it open twice. Let's open this one and see that we have Microsoft and Society in here, and it has the correct data, because if we open up invoices, and I'll show you here. So we can see that Society and Microsoft are in there, and that Society is already invoiced, and the invoice to Satya is not invoiced yet. So that's how easy it actually was to do this. So let's move back to my slides here. Hold on. There we go. showing my taskbar. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so the desktop automation part, yeah, we actually did this whole process. There were some steps that I already did, but you saw that the recording was really easy to do. Make sure to change those properties. Otherwise, when somebody else would look at your process later on, they don't have a clue what actually is being filled into those certain steps. So make sure to be a good citizen and make them really, yeah, handy to see those processes. Let's talk a little bit about web automation. I have to hurry up a little bit, so let's talk about this scenario as well. This is a web automation scenario that is really something that a lot of people that work with RPA should recognize, because this is one about input forms. And what this RPA challenge actually does is you can download an Excel file with certain fields in there, certain rows in there. And this RPA challenge is all about filling in those Excel file rows in there, and do it as fast as you can, and also in the correct way, of course. And normally it wouldn't be that interesting, because input forms, when you would enter those, it's yeah, it has a first name, last name, those kinds of things in there. But the interesting part about this RPA challenge is that every form changes. So when I hit the start button and I would enter all the data in there and click submit, I would have a completely different form. So you can see on the right side now that you have two columns there. So the last name is on the left side, company name is on the right side, and so on. When you would hit submit, it could change something to a completely different form. So it could be 3 columns or 4 columns, and last name could be somewhere totally different on the screen. And that's something that could happen in your RPA process as well, of course, because if you work with websites, you know that people would change the website, they would change the place of the form maybe, or they would use a different technology. And that's something that you want to make sure that your RPA process is as resistant as it can be to those kinds of things. So that the data will be read from the Excel file, the start button will be pushed, and the counter will start. It will repeat the following for 10 times. So it would get all the data from the Excel file, and it would enter all the data per row and then hit submit button after that. And at the end, it will show you how well you did with the counter. So you can see how many seconds it took you and how much the percentage of correct input fields was. So let's move to the website for that. Let me check out here. We have the RPA challenge website here. And I already downloaded the Excel file. The Excel file is on my desktop, and we have the challenge.xlsx here. And you can see that in here we have one column that has all the column names, one row, sorry, with all the column names, and it has all the data in here. So there's 10 entrances in here, and you can run through all those different steps. So let's close this one down and start building our process. Let's hit the edit button to start the process that I already had. I didn't add anything in here. It's just an empty process. So let's start with the get special folder action, because I want to have the desktop folder in here. You can see that it automatically gets the various variables produced, special folder path. And of course, I want to change that because it doesn't say anything. I'm going to change this to desktop path. Let's hit save. And now we have it already configured. The next step is going to be to get the Excel file. So let's go to the Excel part and use the launch Excel part and change the launch Excel option to and open the following document because we want to open a document that we already have here. Select the desktop path from the FX menu, and then we'll use challenge.xlsx. And for the rest, it's all fine by me. So let's select save. And now we want to get the first free row or column from an Excel worksheet and use the same Excel instance that we used. So let's click save here. And then we want to read all the data from here. So let's select again the retrieve values from a range of cells and enter 1, 1 in here and select FX and get the end column. And we have to enter -1 in here to make sure that we don't get the free column as well at the end. The same goes for the row. So let's enter that one as well. And of course, we need to select first line of range contains column names because that's the case. So let's hit save here. And for now, I want to check if this actually works. So let's run this process and see what it does. And it did open the Excel file. It had everything in place here. You can see that the flow variables are on the right side. And you can see my desktop path. You can see the Excel data. You can see the Excel instance, free column, and free row. And the first free row is 1001. And I only had 11 rows in there. The 12th should be the first free row. So this doesn't work. What do we have instead of that? There's an advanced folder here where you can see some more actions. And in here, I want to select the get first free row on column. And here I can select an Excel instance and I can select a column in here. And I just want to select the first column. So I'm going to save this and see what happens now. So let's run this again and see if it will get the correct column here. So it launches Excel. It will get all the stuff in here. And we can see that the first free row on column is number 12. So we need to change this a little bit around because I want to use that number 12 inside this action. So we're going to use the first free row it was. So we're going to change this around to the first free row on column step. And we are going to enter -1 for that. And now it should get the correct data in here. The next step that we want to do, of course, is to open up a browser. Or actually, we can first close Excel here because we don't need Excel anymore after this. So let's do that. We don't have to save the document and save it. And let's go to web automation here. That's another folder here. And you have all kinds of steps also inside here. So there's lots of things available as well. I'm going to use the launch new edge action here. And I'm going to open it up in maximized form. And I'm going to enter the URL of rpachallenge.com. And now I'm going to select save. Let's run this one again. I hope it's going to work, by the way. See, I have my Excel still open. So it might cause some problems. Yeah, it's going to fail. So let me close this one down. There we go. Run. Here it goes. So here we can see that we have the RPA Challenge website open in my Microsoft Edge instance. And you can see that address is the first one, phone numbers in there, all kinds of things are in here. But the first thing we need to do when we do this challenge, we need to hit the start button. So I'm going to select a button here. So here we go. press button on web page. And I want to use a UI element here. And in here, I want to add a new UI element. And in here, I can select the start button. Oh, sorry, I did it the wrong way. Let's do this again. I have to hit Control in here to make sure that it selects the right button. For now, I'm done with this, so let's hit Done. And we have to look and see if this works, of course. So I'm going to run this again and see if the start button was correctly pushed, because it sometimes goes wrong. And that's the case indeed here. So this is going to fail. It couldn't fail. It couldn't think of the. Oh, there's communication error. Uh-oh. Oh, I already know why that is. I have all kinds of windows open. So let's try it again. It should at least open up the. Now it gets the button press failed, error in communication with browser. So I believe that this had something wrong in here. Let me see if I can fix this really soon. At the right side, you can see the FX part, but there's also UI elements. And here we can see the round 1 button, but it needs to be a start button, of course. So let's edit this one and check if we can make this really easy to do. I'm going to unselect some selectors in here to make sure that we can select the right button here. So let's change this and also remove the type here and update it. Let's see if we can do this right now. So here we go. Gonna run again. Open up Edge. And it gave an error. Looks like the communication error is going wrong. So let me check if I can easily figure this out. Or else I need to go to an older version of this one. This should work. Sometimes there is an issue with the browser add-on because I'm using a lot of profiles, and if you have the Power Automate desktop extension in there and you use it on different profiles, it will get an error because you have it in multiple profiles. But I know that's not the case right now, so I'm wondering why this didn't work. But I'm going to continue just to show you how you can select all the different parts in here. So when you would when you want to add all those different parts of your rows into the different forms, you want to have a loop, of course. So here I'm going to use the for each. We're going to iterate over all the Excel data in here. So let's select that one and click select. And then for each, we are going to populate a text field in there. And that UI element, we're going to select that as well. And we want to select this one. I'm going to hit Control and click so that we can see what's in here. And this one is the company name. This is the role in company. This is the address, the first name, the last name, the phone number, and the email at the end. And we also need the submit button here. So let's click done. Now we have all kinds of things available here. I wanted to use the input text in here, the first UI element, but if we go look at that, you can see that it's company name, and that's perfectly fine. So we want that, but it's going to select input text, and then it's going to be JLCGJ, and that's a thing that will change every time that I open this up, because when I would look at this one, and I'm going to inspect this, it will have a code called M3YPI, and that's something completely different. So whenever I would repeat this process, it will get an issue because it will have a different input text. But if you look at the code here on the side, you can see that there is an option here, and it's called ng reflect name. And when you copy that, you can just use that as the selection in the input label. So when we would edit this one, we can edit the selector, and I don't want to use the visual editor in here, but we want to use this one, and we want to do it almost the same as ID is quote quote with something in between here, but we want to do it like this. So in this case, we can actually fill company name. Oh, sorry, I didn't edit anything in here. For this case, we want to, of course, have the current item and then the name of the column. And I don't know what the column actually is in here. So let's open up the Excel. It's company name. So here we'll change it to company name. And this way you can actually enter all those different things in here. You might also want to rename the UI element, because input text and the name of that is probably not something that you want to remember. So just use input company name in here, and that way it makes it a lot more easy for you to do. And that is also what you can do for the other parts, of course. So this one, I believe that one, oh, hold on. That one was the role in company. So let's select that one as well and go to the visual editor or the non-visual editor and change this. Oh, I actually copied a little bit too much in here. So let's look up the ng reflect name from that as well. So let's select the.
Just a quick note. Just time coming up, so 2 more minutes.
Oh yeah, let's finish up then. But you get the gist. We were you can just change this around for all the different parts in here. So if we want to have a different one, we can just select the input, and then you have the ng reflect name, label phone, etc., etc., etc. And you have to repeat that for everything in here to make sure that you'll get the right parts in here. So I'm going to skip back to my presentation, because otherwise we're not going to make it in time. I'll send a YouTube link as well into my in my deck, so that you can see the complete demo here for that same demo. So let's move on from here. Thanks for the timing thing, Tricia. On the Power Automate website, you can create your automated flows, which everybody probably already know. You can create that and then use the run a flow built by Power Automate desktop preview, and use that to trigger your attended flows. There's 2 types of flows, run modes. You can use attended. That way you need to be logged in to your machine, and unattended is for the automated scenarios where you don't want to log into a machine and you don't want to have a person available, but you want to have the robot to log in into your machine and so on. They have their own runs. So if you look at this, you can see that whenever a flow fails, UI flow fails, you can see all the different steps in here, and you can even see a screenshot of what happened during the fail. So that's also really interesting. Short part about licensing. You need a per user plan with attended RPA to design all the different flows. You can also, if your RPA flows have a lot of runs, for instance, and a lot of API requests before that, you probably want to use the per flow plan to do that. And there's also the unattended RPA add-on for all the robots that you're going to use. And that's, of course, a lot more expensive. But if you want to scale, it's something that's really interesting. So yeah, the good is that Power Automate Desktop offers a lot of great capabilities to automate desktop and web applications. It saves all the processes to the cloud. It uses CDS for that. So if your laptop or your virtual machine crashes, you still have the saved process. You can just install Power Automate Desktop again, log in, and you will have all the different processes available again. And there's also the possibility of using solutions and other CDS features to make it a more ALM ready approach also. The bad is that please don't use this for everything. You can still use automated flows to automate certain stuff. So make sure to use it whenever you have a legacy application. Don't use it when there's already an API available and you can build a custom connector or maybe use one of the out-of-the-box connectors. Then we have a lot of resources in here. I'll make sure to add also the demo that I just failed to make work. I'll add that also in here to make sure that you know how you can automate that as well. And with that, I want to close it down. So if there are some questions, I don't know if there's any time, Trisha, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think what we can do is maybe one question.
Yeah, let's do it in the chat otherwise, because I want to give the next speaker the time. So do it in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to give Joe permissions, but in the meanwhile, if you want to wrap up, that's fine. Sorry for cutting you short.
No problem. I wasn't on time, so that's that's a big thing. I'll put the video, by the way, in the chat. That's maybe easier. And, let me see.
Okay, hi. So I've put the link for the feedback in the chat window. If you can see that. And what I'll ask is that you do remember to keep posting about the event. We are giving away 2 $50 Amazon gift cards to the people with the most social media posts. Don't forget to use the hashtag D365Wave2 Saturday. And each time you submit a feedback form, you're entered into a raffle to win another $50 gift card. So you do have the opportunity to win big today. Yay. I'd also really like to thank Dan for his session. Really, really useful and insightful. I know I still need to play around with Power Automate Desktop. I'll be taking a lot of what he said here and rewatching the video. The call was recorded and it will be available on the Powerthon YouTube channel in a few days. Okay. Daniel's going to be answering the questions in the chat to wrap up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Joe, who's going to be talking about Power BI